This episode is brought to you by Avalanche and Paraswap. You'll hear more about them later in the show. Enjoy.
I think it was Wells Fargo has 20,000 employees, Coinbase has 2,000 employees, and Uniswap has 20 employees. I think there's a lot of people participating in this because it's a cultural shift.
Alrighty, folks. Really excited for this episode. We got Jack Butcher. Jack, I reached out to Sam Parr, who I know you're close with, before this episode. I said, I'm bringing Jack on the show. Give me some tidbits. He goes, oh my God, Jack Butcher. He goes, hands down, one of the most interesting guys I've ever met. So no pressure here. Anyways, man, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. Like, I want to get your take on creator economy. I want to get your take on NFTs, and we'll kind of focus the conversation around pretty much creator economy and NFTs as well. But honestly, I've got your hoodie on for anyone watching on YouTube, and you've got your course, and you've got your NFTs, and you've got the hats, and a million and one things. And so I just wanted to ask you, how many different ways are you monetizing your personal brand right now?
Started as a design consulting business, Visualize Value did, and got to a point where it made more sense to think about product just because we couldn't serve the demand that was created off the back of the content. So the courses were the first, and that's obviously all digital products. So that was the first decentralization of income, if you will. And then after that, played with community for a little while, which we now made a free component of the education material. So was a subscription. I toyed with subscription content for a little while earlier this year. It's a good experiment, but it's similar to like a Hustle Trends. You mentioned Sam Parr, like a community where you can you produce content consistently, and that just didn't really fit the model. So that was an experiment we ran and got rid of. NFTs and then physical merchandise is something that we've been playing with just this year, and books. So books, like putting all the prints into books and like making an annual edition. We did a manual fulfillment of that the first time around, which was absolute chaos. But we're just working with a partner now to like self-publish something and have the distribution partner. So that would be probably third, fourth way.
So it almost feels like creators are basically creating more liquid markets around themselves, right? It feels like with Web3, everything gets financialized. And so you look at like a Web2 creator, and the way that they monetize is primarily, let's say ads, courses, and maybe merch, right? Ads, courses, and merch. There's good upside there, but it's not like a liquid market. Like, it's like a sell once type of thing. In Web3, if you look at the way that creators are monetizing, NFTs, right? Once you launch your NFT, that's a liquid market. Social tokens. Once you launch your social token, that's a liquid market. A lot of creators like yourself and like Packy and Sahil Bloom and all these people, they're now investing as well. They're becoming angel investors. So again, financialized upside. Great risk, big downside. Is that like kind of where you see creators going? It's everything kind of almost becomes this liquid market for creators that you can fans can invest in. There's upside, there's great upside, but there's also great downside.
Yeah, I think so. I think that feels like the progression or the trend is like just the reduction of friction, or the shortening of the feedback loop to like and I think we saw it even in the Web2 stuff and Twitter, and the moment in time that COVID sort of took over the world. I think there was, this bubble that I have been inside of and, try to step outside of occasionally. There was just this massive, exponential shift to online socializing and learning, obviously, a couple of years ago. And that resulted in, people figuring out how to build these massive networks completely remotely. And I think the most elegant executions in Web3 are people that have, built something prior to, and figured out a way to kind of bring this technology to their audience, or like enhance the relationship they already had with their audience with these new tools. Web3 is just kind of the financial layer that just sort of slides into that equation.
So basically, if you look at like alpha in the market, like in the stock market, right? Like you go back and it's kind of like these 50-year-old white dudes who work on Wall Street had all the alpha, and then that starts to open up, right? And then you get crypto, right? And crypto gives retail investors alpha for the first time. Like if you look at who made the returns, it's not the Wall Street folks, it's the retail crowd. But eventually eventually crypto gets institutionalized. And some of the alpha gets sucked out of the industry, which the space will be much bigger, will 10x, will 100x, but some of the alpha gets sucked out. But if you actually think about social tokens, they could be really interesting because there's just no way for a 50 or a 60-year-old investor to have the cultural alpha. And so like I think about, I spend a lot of time on Twitter, right? So I see people pretty early and I feel like I have a good knack of who's going to blow up. I like Sahil Bloom is on my mind because I had dinner with him last night. But I remember when he had 7,000 followers, I texted his account to my co-founder and I was like, this guy's going to be big. Watch this account. Last night, I looked at his account. He has 700,000. So he's 100x, right? And it would have been amazing if I could have invested in that and taken a bet on him, or people who find songs really early, or people who find Instagram pages early, or TikTokers early. There's got to be a way to take a bet on that because that's the last bit of alpha remaining that Wall Street can't extract
until we figure out another
until we figure out another
in a few more years. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Would you ever consider monetizing like an hour of your week? Create a token, the JB token, and basically what that get. You have done that?
Yeah. So I sold auctioned NFTs for a 3-hour window. Just kind of the cool thing about that as well, I think, is like price discovery.
3-hour one time or 3-hour like per week or what? Back it up. So tell us about the structure. What happened here?
A 1 3-hour slot. So I did 4 auctions on Foundation that were I called it workday. Split the day up into 4 parts, 3 hours each, and then whoever wins the auction, we do a 3-hour session, whatever you want to work on. So the 3 of them were commissioned art pieces, and then 1 was more of a consulting design exercise. And the interesting thing is I started at minimum reserve on Foundation, and it kind of this is another, I think, interesting thing about. So I always bounce between would this have been possible on Web 2, and maybe it would have, but it also depends upon the shift in culture on the other side of the transaction too, right? Like the normalization of auctioning off creative work is something I think that Web3 has advanced pretty significantly in a short period of time. So people bid on them. And the other interesting thing I think is, a creator's time is a really scarce resource, obviously the scarcest resource, and creative people are notoriously awful at pricing their time. And this is just a really interesting way to get price discovery on your time. And who knows if it's inflated because you're early in there's a lot of hype around the format or the way in which you're doing it, but it's a really interesting exercise. And the relationship even is different because you're not going through the same process you would typically to hire someone, right? It's not like, hey, let's go back and forth on emails and negotiate X, Y, and Z. The people who are bidding on that really want to work with you, and the experiences that I had with those people were exponentially better than client work I've done in the past because of the way in which that got teed up.
Wait, so what happened with this? So you put it out at minimum price. I'm assuming the thing gets bid up. What did you end up selling 3 hours of your time for?
So I think they went an average of 1.1 Ethereum or something. So back when, it's $1,000 an hour back then, which I would never be able to charge as a designer on the like in the traditional market, right?
And does that person keep that NFT?
Yeah, they keep the NFT, but you know what I think is smart?
But there's no utility to the NFT. It was a NFT with utility, and now the utility's gone, right?
Oh, I minted, in the case of two of them, I minted an art piece after and transferred that to them. I think My First Million actually did a smart execution of an NFT. Did you see that? They auctioned off some like ad space.
I did. Sean and Sam. Yeah. Did they run with that? Did they execute that all the way through?
I don't know, but this was the cool part of that they kind of built on the concept is you have to burn the NFT to redeem the slot. So it can trade on the secondary market for a period of time. And then, if you want to use it, you have to burn the NFT, which is, a smart way to close the whole loop out.
What is your framework and for looking at where we're at with NFTs right now, why they're so valuable, where we go from here? How are you thinking about what's the date today? November 23rd. How are you thinking about NFTs and just what's your framework for viewing them right now?
I think there's waves of almost like tranches of people that use and understand NFTs in different ways. It feels like pre 2021 was hyper crypto native, you're already probably been in crypto 5+ years if you knew what an NFT was in 2020, or you knew somebody who was deep down the crypto rabbit hole. And I think some of that work that was produced at the CryptoPunks of the world, the X copies, this is historic artifacts in the NFT, in the journey of NFTs becoming a thing. These things just always have relevance for that reason. Then the second wave is the opportunist is maybe not the best word, but there was this massive influx of projects, maybe March, April, May of this year, which is it feels to me like there's a couple of months go by and a lot of people go to ground when they see an idea, they start building, and then you have, the collective consciousness just produces 500 of the same thing, and some of them resonate and become these cultural artifacts, like a Bored Ape Yacht Club. And some of the creators in early 2021 were basically inventing the formats or the mechanisms for NFTs. So you even creators that would do things like a mint pass or a whitelist, or there are these it's very similar to the Web 2 creator economy in that someone will sort of pioneer a tactic or a format, and then you just see that proliferate throughout. And now I think we're getting to the very first wave of big brand adoption, because it's going to take 9 months, 12 months to have conversations to even get them to try a little mini experiment. The question mark in my head is when does the term NFT go away? Because I think there is a pop culture. A lot of people think NFTs are, the worst thing ever to be conceived by mankind. So I think there's a cultural shift that we're, still on the other side of, where you almost lose the acronym that goes with this thing, in the same way you don't say TCP IP, I'm going to go and chat with Jason on a voice over IP call. I think we're still a way off, because there's still rampant speculation around the idea that if something is an NFT, it is inherently valuable because we're so early, and this is these are the genesis executions in this space. And I think that's more true than the dot-com bubble comparison, because they are legit artifacts that you can own, not in the same way that those companies 20 odd years ago went to zero. I think there's a lot of people participating in this because it's a cultural shift, and I don't see the same. I don't see the same amount of like drop off or fallout. One thing that NFTs like exposed me to, honestly, is like the scale of the internet in a whole new dimension. Like running an online business and building up a decent size network of people across social networks will give you one like order of magnitude understanding of how like software leverage can like take your business to another level. But then if you look at some of these NFT drops, you're just like, what is going on? Like the 10,000 assets that you sell out in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And I think that gets to the like the potential financial upside, or the slight shift in thinking that this object is going to be worth more tomorrow than it was today, creates an entirely different behavior. But I think we need to move past every NFT having the expectation of a financial return for it to become like a thing everywhere, because as everybody knows, like 95% of ideas don't work over the long term. So I think we're just on the like almost gold rush phase of like run 1,000 experiments, and then we're going to start to see like the concepts and the mechanics that stick around have been proven.
Empire is proud to be supported by Avalanche. There is a layer 1 war heating up in crypto, and Avalanche is at the center of it. Avalanche is one of the fastest smart contract platforms in the industry. I've been looking into the ecosystem recently and am honestly amazed by how fast it's growing. Here are 3 reasons why I'm so intrigued by Avalanche. Number 1, Curve and Aave, 2 of the biggest DeFi protocols, are in testing right now for Avalanche integrations. Number 2, new projects. These are not just NFT clones, AMM knockoffs, and lending protocols. These are new projects, NFT projects, play to earn games, really, really interesting stuff happening in the Avalanche ecosystem. And number 3, Binance just re-enabled C-chain integration. What in the world does this mean? This means that you, the user, can directly withdraw to your MetaMask, which previously was a pretty big user bottleneck. Thank you, Avalanche, for sponsoring Empire. We are going to continue to explore Avalanche in future episodes. Hope you enjoy it. I would recommend that you do the same. Empire is proud to be supported by Paraswap. Paraswap is one of the leading DEX aggregators in crypto. Let's say you're booking a flight. You would never go directly to an airline, right? You'd never go directly to United or Delta. You'd obviously go to Google Flights or Expedia or Kayak or Booking.com. That's what Paraswap does for DeFi. Paraswap, if you're watching on YouTube right now, you can see the platform. Paraswap makes swapping easier, it makes it faster, it makes it cheaper by aggregating more than 80 different DEXs. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, Uniswap, Sushi, Balancer, Bancor into one single interface. You can use Paraswap on ETH, Polygon, as you can see here, BSC. They recently launched Avalanche a few weeks ago, pretty exciting. If you are a trader listening to this, you are losing money by not using Paraswap. And excitingly enough, if you're a company or a platform looking to access the swapping or the yield capabilities of DEXs, you can now use Paraswap's APIs to integrate into your platform to get the full power of the DEX aggregator into your platform. So head on over to paraswap.io. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see how simple it is to use. Just plug in, let's say I want to swap, 0.2 ETH. For USDT, you can see how simple it is. Just plug that in right there, and it aggregates over 80 different DEXs. So head on over to Paraswap, Paraswap.io to use the platform today. All right, let's get back to the show. One area where that becomes really interesting is like in like the traditional art market, it's all about your first drop. It's about like, you want to make sure that like when you send out art out into the world, it's valuable right when you send it out into the world, because that like the price of the art kind of dictates how good it is, right? And so traditionally, to make it as an artist, you've always kind of needed to convince a gatekeeper with a gallery to hype up the primary sale, and then once you made it once the primary hit, it was kind of considered to be successful art. But NFTs kind of flip that on its head, where And now artists can basically just instead give away your work, right? You can just give away your work. You can put it up for 0.0003 ETH, right? For $20 or something. And then you can start to earn a living from the secondary sales as your work appreciates in value, and the work starts to appreciate more in value. The more people who see it, the more people who, the more that the kind of the meme, the message proliferates throughout the internet. So it's not really about the primary anymore. There's no gatekeeper, and it's not about the primary, which means that more artists create more work.
Yeah, it starts to like change the creative output, and you're right. You don't. I actually felt like maybe I made a mistake with some of the ways I released work over time, and it's really not in my nature to be like incredibly strategic about like, okay, we're gonna do this thing, then go silent for 3 months and be really mysterious, and then do this other thing. I'm like a iterator, and I need to get stuff out and done. And there's probably an argument to be made that if you went the route of like, work with a agent from the traditional art world, you might have even been able to have a more lucrative relationship with the art market, but it's also just I just find it less fun or less consistent with how I like to operate. And I think that's the cool thing about this is if you're like a volume person, there's a few NFT like participants that, like these profile picture projects, 10,000 pieces of work is like a lifetime of work if you're producing pieces by hand. But the combination of the computer as a tool to make work and like these liquid markets that can just pool attention massive, like in just a ridiculously efficient way, is going to change the types of work that gets made, to your point.
Yeah. We're going to do something new actually on Empire that a lot of folks have suggested, which is we're going to take some questions from the audience. And by that, I mean, we're just going to look at some of the tweets that people responded to. Nice. Adam Fatchler, head of content strategy at blockchain.com. How should brands be thinking about NFTs? Did
you see that Adidas drop yesterday?
Yeah.
That's
the most British way of saying Adidas I've ever heard.
Adidas. Adidas. So I think there's like, man, I worked in...
So tell us about that. I don't know how much you paid attention to the drop, but if you're able to share about it.
I saw them tweet out, and I think Sandbox tweeted out that they bought a plot of land in the Sandbox. I don't know how much they divulged about what the project is going to be, but I think what's interesting about, or the distinction that I was trying to draw attention to there is brands can execute in a like crypto culture native way, which I think Adidas were able to do with that. It's a bold strategy to like go into the world of crypto, right? Build these relationships with existing crypto brands versus, the traditional way a brand would execute a campaign is like, we want to build our own infrastructure. We want this to be hosted on our own website. We need to have creative control of everything. I think that mentality does not mesh well with the world of NFTs and crypto. And then there's the like, hey, we want to get you involved, and we wouldn't be where we are without the people that make this relevant. I think perhaps Adidas understands that based on executing this way. It's like you want to place yourself in a network that has the fewest barriers to like taking advantage of existing network effects. I think people will build NFT projects that have zero, like a Martha Stewart or something. I didn't even look at what that drop was, but I bet you it's just a landing page. It's like, hey, mint a Martha Stewart NFT, or like there's a few rappers I've seen that have done these things. It's just like there's no attempt to like join the culture. It's like just an extractive, like, hey, we see this thing is trendy, and a marketing manager somewhere has just been told, do an NFT thing. We just saw that, person or brand X has made money doing NFTs. So I think the the idea of giving up some control is the first like mental hurdle that brands have to get over, versus like, hey, we're going to try and, just coast off the momentum of this trend independently of all of the infrastructure that already exists.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important to just understand what type of company you are too, right? Like if you're a fashion brand, just understanding that pretty soon we're going to have a digital closet and a physical closet, and you won't just have a physical closet. And so, I think I had this thread maybe 2 weeks ago or something. I think what will end up happening is just let's take fashion specifically, and like clothing and stuff like that. I think you will eventually, instead of going onto a website and creating an account with a username and password, you'll just basically log into the website with your MetaMask or some other Web3 type browser, which fixes the first problem of the internet, which is there's all these username and passwords sitting in private databases. And then the next thing that you could see happening is, let's say I buy a new pair of Nikes, right? What happens is I get the physical Nikes, but I also get an airdrop of Nike drops the NFT of those Nikes into my wallet. And then that NFT can be used to enter different communities. Maybe I get a royalty on their earnings. Maybe I get access to special events for NFT holders. But also, really importantly, my metaverse character, my Yano in the sandbox or in Decentraland, gets to wear these NFTs now. And I think Nikes are dope, right? So I want my character in the digital world, where there's way more people seeing me in the digital world than in the physical world. I want to wear those Nikes. So I think that brands who lean in will do a really good job. But I also think it's important to recognize that at a certain point, a Web 2 company is a Web 2 company. And it's not like most of the Web 1 companies didn't win because the Web 2 folks just ate their lunch. And so I think it's like, okay, what can Supreme, like let's say the fashion brand Supreme, right? It's like, what can Supreme do to become a Web 3 company? There's probably a lot. But at the end of the day, I would put money down that like a Bored Apes are probably just the new Supreme, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. It has a lot to do with like the culture internally, and I think a lot of brands will attempt to solve this by either like hiring consultants on the outside or having like one person in the business, versus, like you say, you're competing with maybe a much smaller team, but they're completely native to this medium. And I think I read this may be an unfair comparison, but I read a tweet a year ago now, probably. It said, I think it was Wells Fargo has 20,000 employees, Coinbase has 2,000 employees, and Uniswap has 20 employees. And I think you can make that same comparison to, a fashion brand like, Artifact is probably, a much more capital and like culturally efficient fashion brand than, pick one in the real world. There's, I think any would struggle to compare just based on like output per person. And some brands just have enough like cultural clout to overcome that. I think like Nike's a good example, but others just don't.
Can you give us a sneak peek into some of the things you're thinking about for next year? Like any big plans that you have?
We're in the process of building some native NFT contracts for visualized value. So we've been using marketplaces and tools that have obviously been built to support artists, but trying to dig deeper into what's possible on, if you have control of the contract, and what can you actually do from an art perspective in NFTs that you can't with a piece of art that isn't an NFT. And I think doing an exhibit or a collection of sorts that, the idea behind visualized value as a entity is like trying to help people understand complicated things in a simpler way. I think there's a few big ideas around how you can create an NFT collection that educates people on what NFTs are, in by sort of unpacking all the different qualities and all the different things that the technology makes possible. So that's something that's just been cooking up for a long time. And I'm also working on a product called Decrypt, which is basically a like first principles of crypto and internet culture, which I think is, maybe something that would be distributed around something like a brand that's trying to figure out whether they're whether they can, execute in Web3, or if it even makes sense. So essentially just trying to take what I'm learning in real time, as I described at the beginning of the podcast, and turn it into content that other people can leverage to build stuff.
Love that. That's great, man. I'm looking forward to that. I've one last question, then we can wrap this up, which is, let's say the market does turn. Let's say we do go into a bad bear market, right? Price of Bitcoin falls 50%, ETH falls 60%. Some of these NFTs probably fall 70, 80%. Do you think that we emerge? Do you think that things like Chromie Squiggles and Bored Apes and Punks end up becoming kind of the Mona Lisas and the Van Goghs, and the Monets, of the digital world, and that probably 95% of these NFT projects won't actually make it through the bear market, but the ones that are really, really good will end up being big, good buying opportunities in the bear market. Do you think about it like that, or you're more of an optimist when it comes to the bear market than I am?
I think again, I was not heavily involved in crypto through any of the really aggressive bear markets. I've held Bitcoin and Ethereum for a decent amount of time, but wasn't in crypto Twitter refreshing charts all day through any of that stuff. So my opinion on what that feels like or how bad that would be, now my position has changed, is not don't have as much experience as you in that world, but the question around the pieces that will stay valuable, I think there's the art block stuff and punks, I feel a high level of conviction on, for sure. That stuff just feels like true historical artifacts, and you've kind of reached a point of saturation now where, again, I think there's just another layer to NFTs which is very different than just an asset like a Bitcoin or an Ethereum, where it's got this additional support, if you will, where there's this cultural and identity component to it, where there's a higher cost to somebody. There's a higher social cost to somebody changing positions on a NFT collectible than there is revolving out of a position on Coinbase or wherever else. So I think that's really interesting. I also the bear case for it is, how big is the space really? How many people are actually aware of what these things are relative to the internet and the population at large? And that's the one way I would look at it or think about it, where it's maybe it's not maybe it's not the most sure of things if there's only a few million people that get it and believe in it, right? That's still still a niche.
Yeah, though I think my pushback there is it's really hard to predict total addressable markets for new technologies, right? If you think about the mobile phone, even just think about how we call these things. It's internet companies. We used to have internet companies. Now we just have companies. We used to have. So it's how big was the total addressable market for internet companies? Well, in 1994, there were only 1,000 websites, right? 1,000 websites in the world. So mobile phones, right? We don't call them mobile phones. It's just your phone, right? Everyone's got a phone. Everyone's got a phone now, and they're all mobile phones, right? And so it's how big is the market for digital art? I don't know. I don't think we'll call it digital art. It's just art.
I agree.
Right?
It's like the social media. I think social media is a good comparison. It's how big is the market for content? It's what do you even mean? Yeah, it's just how could you even begin to answer that question?
What is that? What are you saying? So, anyways, Jack, this is an awesome conversation, man. I'm super happy to just see how successful you've been this year. And like, it's just, I think the internet rewards people who take big risks and who put themselves out there. And I think you've done a good job of that and inspired a lot of people with it. So I'm excited to see what you build going into next year, man.
Thank you, man. Likewise. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course. Enjoy the family time.